from a small school called Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, the Bachelor of Science in Chemical Engineering. I was involved in my Air Force ROTC debt as well. So I graduated from Air Force ROTC. That's how I became an officer. Then after this, I'm going to be going down to Mississippi where I'm going to be a pilot. So if anyone has any specific pilot questions, I'd be more than happy to answer that.
Nice. Really quick, just to interrupt, and I apologize for that. I need to let students know that I am going to be recording this meeting.
Okay.
So understand that, we lack any confidentiality and nothing controversial, please. I'm gonna mute out now.
Awesome. No worries. Thank you. Thanks for letting me know that. Perfect. So kind of talking between officer and enlisted. So out of the 320,000 active duty members, about a quarter of them are officers and 3/4 of them are enlisted. This comes with different roles. So if you're an enlisted member and you're fixing an aircraft, for example, you're actually involved in the technical job of the aircraft. So turning the wrench, being very involved in diagnosing the problem and so forth. But if you're an officer, you're more involved in the manager and supervisory role. So that's kind of the major difference between officers and enlisted in the Air Force. The enlisted are basically the backbone. That's what I like to call it. And the officers are more supervisors. This comes also with different pay scales since officers have college degrees. Enlisted don't have college degrees. They come right out of high school. And with that, this doesn't include housing and food. So for example, if you live in DC, you get an added housing allowance as an officer, about $2,300 a month untaxed, and then $260 a month untaxed as well for food. And that's all public. This is all public information. But just with base pay, taxable income, this is kind of the difference between enlisted and officer in terms of pay. So, but with that, as I said before, the enlisted are the backbone of the Air Force. So if you have a specific interest in a specific technical career field, like you want to be someone who operates in tower, or you want to be someone who is fixing a plane, for example, then you might want to go enlisted. So that's kind of my pitch with that. Person mentality, the air traffic controllers is what I was looking for. But with that, some people go officer to go into a certain career. So for example, if you want to be a pilot, you want to do any kind of flying career, then you want to be an officer. So for example, there's 4 different flying careers in the Air Force. There's pilot, there's combat systems officer, which is like a first officer. There's a drone pilot, and there's an air battle manager. 3 of those careers, everything except pilot, is 6 years plus training, active duty requirement, and then pilot is 10 years plus training of an active duty requirement. Every other job in the Air Force and the Space Force is a 4-year active duty requirement. And to join the Space Force, you actually have to go through a program like Air Force ROTC or the Academy or any kind of Air Force joining source. So you can join as a space operations officer, specifically launching satellites. You can join as a cyberspace officer, engineering officer, intelligence officer, acquisitions officer, in either the Air Force or the Space Force. And then every other job is primarily Air Force, like doctor, lawyer, finance, maintenance, logistics, and a bunch of other medical career fields. So this doesn't even touch the tip of the iceberg and all the different careers that are in the Air Force. If you want to do something with flying, you absolutely can, but you definitely don't have to. You could be working on a flying base, being a finance officer, and you pretty much will have no interaction with planes. So definitely, if you have any specific questions about career, I can answer them. But with that, in the Air Force, there's a lot of different bases all across the United States. That's the really cool thing. I'm from Seattle, and now I live in DC, and I went to school in Albany, New York. So I've already seen a lot of the country in the middle that I never would have seen before, just moving across the country, actually driving across the country. And my next stop will be in Columbus, Mississippi. So it's just going to keep going after that. I'm just going to keep moving and moving and moving every 3 years. And then that's kind of the life of being in the military. But another cool thing is you can even move overseas. So that's very unique to the military, not just the Air Force, that we have overseas locations, overseas bases. So you don't have to do any visa or anything. You don't have to change anything with your citizenship. You can just pretty much move and continue to serve your country, but also be stationed overseas in both Europe and Asia, along with places that aren't necessarily different countries, but are kind of far away, like Hawaii and Alaska, and then other U.S. territories. So being in the military, you definitely have the opportunity to live in other places other than the United States while still staying in the military. All right, now we're all caught up. So there's 3 different officer sources. So I talked about enlisting. You pretty much just contact your local recruiter as a high school student after you've graduated, and you can join the Air Force, join active duty immediately as an enlisted member. But if you want to be a leader, you want to be an officer, you want to be some kind of a flying job, then you have to go through one of the 3 officer sources. And the first one I'm going to talk about is the U.S. Air Force Academy. So I didn't go to the academy myself. There's a specific academy liaison for the DMV area that I can definitely get you into contact with if you have any questions about that. But the academy is one way to become an officer in the Air Force. So that has about 1,000 spots per year for each class. It's tuition free, you have a military lifestyle 24/7. So that's the biggest thing, is that you're always a military cadet, you're always on, and then you don't have a civilian aspect to your life. With this, there's 5 years of active duty after the Air Force Academy, unlike the Air Force ROTC program and Officer Training School, which are 4 years, so an added year of active duty. So that's the main difference. If you have any specific questions, definitely ask about that. With Officer Training School, that's after you've already gotten your bachelor's degree. So it's 9.5 weeks down in Alabama, and after that, you become a second lieutenant. So it's just 9.5 weeks, and then you become an officer. So generally, these are offered more to prior enlisted member, people that put active duty time in being an enlisted member and then want to become an officer. You can absolutely apply for this after you've gotten your bachelor's degree, being 22 and everything, but it's a lot more competitive. It's very difficult to get into, and academically, you have to be very, very good to get an officer training school. So with that, Air Force ROTC is the largest commissioning program in the United States for Air Force officers. It's offered at 1,100 plus colleges. It's an officer candidate program, and again, it's offered at civilian institutions. So the whole point of Air Force ROTC is you do your training on the side, and then at the same time, you're going to a civilian school. On the days that you have to wear a uniform, you do wear a uniform the whole day, depending on the school and the atmosphere and the environment and everything. But when I went to school and everything, we would wear our uniform twice a week for the whole day. So that's, you're still a military cadet, but every other day, and after those duty hours are over, you're pretty much done with everything, and you're effectively a civilian student. It's also a 3 to 4 year program. So if you don't join as a freshman, you can still join as a sophomore, and you can still successfully finish all your requirements. The program instruction is made up of a 1 to 3 credit aerospace studies course. So that's called AS class. And this is pretty much this is taught by an officer at your Air Force ROTC detachment. The 1 credit course is primarily, so it's both your freshman and sophomore year, and it's primarily on the basics of being in the Air Force, the indoctrination into the Air Force, and the history of the Air Force. So just like all the basic knowledge you should have about the Air Force, being a military member in the Air Force. So the 3 credit class is more about officer-specific topics. So it'll be about national security, mentorship, leadership, and how to deal with things as officers with enlisted members and junior officers to use. So that's kind of what your AS class will look like, and it's taught by an officer. Next thing is leadership laboratory. So this is kind of the leadership in practice, the military in practice part of your military training. So you're thinking about all the saluting, marching, folding of flags, small unit tactics, leading people, following people, working as a team, survival training, so forth. All those things kind of go into leadership laboratory, and that's 3 hours a week taught by upperclassmen to underclassmen, supervised by officer and enlisted at your Air Force ROTC detachment. The last part is physical training, so that's twice a week. So it's a lot of running and body weight exercises. So I tell anyone interested in any capacity in the military, regardless of the Air Force, Army, Navy, you should start running. Start running now. If you're not a big runner, then when you get to college or when you get to your first enlistment, you're going to have a lot of trouble, meeting the standards and everything. And it's going to be a central point of your focus, and you want to focus on other things. So definitely, try to start running now, get into shape if you're not already in shape or not already playing a sport and so forth. Last part is there's a lot of competitive scholarships attached to Air Force ROTC. You can earn both as a senior in high school, but also in college. So if you don't get one in high school, you're not done. You can still earn one in college. And I'll talk more about that in a second. I'm going to talk first about cadet life. What does your life look like being in Air Force ROTC? So for the first 2 years I mentioned before, you're part of the general military course. So that's pretty much where you're being taught everything, being evaluated the whole time about your ability to be in the military, ability to be a leader and everything. And that's because you go to this evaluation-based training called field training. So you have to get a ticket to go to field training, and you have to successfully graduate field training in order to continue Air Force ROTC into your junior and senior year. Field training is mainly an evaluation on your ability to work as a team, and also just your leadership and military professionalism and stuff like that. So if you successfully graduate that, you'll continue into the professional officer course part of the Air Force ROTC program, and then you'll basically mentor freshmen and sophomores for the rest of your time there. And then after that, you'll graduate as a second lieutenant. As a cadet, though, you're not limited to cadet activities. So that's the most important thing, is that you can do things like Greek life, intramural sports, different clubs, and also if you are a student athlete and you actually play sports for your school, we will waive that physical training requirement because you're already putting in more physical training time than Air Force ROTC cadets. You just have to take a physical fitness assessment at the beginning of each semester. So we for sure welcome student athletes into joining Air Force ROTC. And with that, there's also a lot of in-college opportunities that you wouldn't ordinarily get as a civilian. So for example, I was in my school's honor guard in the top left, and I got to visit a lot of different colleges and high schools and participate in their drill competitions, along with just meeting a lot of different cool people from these different events. But with that, you can also go to different leadership symposiums where you hear from some pretty important, famous people from both the private sector and the public and the military. So, for example, I believe Mike Bloomberg came to one of these a couple of years ago, and then I went to one last year where we had a couple of people from the private sector and the military that would come and teach us a lot of different leadership lessons and stuff like that. So, big businessmen and also just big military leaders come and offer you their experiences on teamwork and organizations and stuff. But I think the cooler part about this is you get to meet a lot of interesting people at these events. You get to meet a lot of cadets from both the academy and ROTC, and even active duty military members that are from foreign military. So I remember I met German and British Navy members and got to get their perspective on things. A little bit more exciting, Air Force Academy Free Fall. So this is the jump school sponsored by the Air Force Academy. You get an official pair of jump wings if you complete this on the left part of your chest. And basically, this is the only program in the country where you do complete your 5 solo jumps completely solo. So even your first one is completely solo, no paracord, no instructor. And this is because they do a week-long safety training before. The second lieutenant that I work with, he does my job, but in Philadelphia. So he spoke very highly of it. He said it was pretty amazing, and just the detail orientation was incredible. But also, he just had a good time jumping out of a plane. So that's what I figured it is. But you can definitely do this as an Air Force ROTC cadet. As an Academy cadet, it's a lot easier since it's right in your backyard. But as an Air Force ROTC cadet, you absolutely have the ability to do this. So if you're interested in that, definitely talk to your Air Force ROTC detachment, and they'll try to get you in, assuming you meet all the qualifications. Last one I'm going to talk about is Project Go. But before I get onto this, I just wanted to say that there's a lot more professional development trainings you can do as a cadet than the ones that I mentioned. You can even shadow an officer. That's called Ops Air Force. You can do survival training. That's called ESET. There's a lot of different professional development trainings that you can do as a cadet, and there's a huge list of them. And your cadre will continually tell you about these opportunities. Cadre are the people that work at your Air Force ROTC detachment, active duty. So when I say cadre, I mean the officers and the enlisted members. But they'll consistently just churn these out to you, and it's your choice if you want to do these and if you meet the qualifications to do these. With this, Project Go stands for Project Global Officer. That's the study abroad program sponsored by Air Force ROTC and paid for by the Department of Defense. So the Department of Defense funds this for Air Force ROTC cadets because they want officers that are well-rounded, that understand the importance of diversity, but also understand that the military is a global entity. So the Department of Defense funds this. It's not just to Middle Eastern countries, it's to countries all across the world. So it really depends on what you're interested in, what you're studying and stuff like that. But for example, this is my friend who is a lieutenant in New York City, and she was studying Arabic and stuff like that. So she went to Oman to expand her knowledge of that. With that, I think the coolest thing is this is your family. So this is kind of just a military specific thing. These are the people you spend the most time with. I think that's the most valuable thing about being in the military is that you have a family kind of everywhere. You have friends that are lifelong because you went through so many training cycles with them. So I think that's the best part about being in Air Force ROTC, but also just specifically being in the Air Force. So that's all I have about cadet life. If anyone has any questions, definitely speak up. I can only see my screen right now, so I wouldn't be able to see the chat immediately. So if anyone has any questions, just cut me off to stop me. But otherwise, I'm going to move on to the scholarship program and how exactly tuition assistance and living assistance works and stuff like that. So the living expenses works, excuse me. So with that, there's 3 types of scholarships that you can earn in high school for college. So there's a type 1, a type 2, and a type 7. So when you apply for the high school scholarship program, you don't specify, again, which one you're applying for. You just apply kind of for a blanket application, blanket national application. You don't tie it to any college. You do tie it to a major. So that's important. I'll talk about that a little bit later. But the colleges that you tie it to, they're very tentative. You could end up not going to any of those. But high school scholarship program is a very general national application. Type 1, which covers 100% of tuition and fees for public or private school. It's offered to about 5% of the recipients for scholarships. Type 2 is $18,000 a year for 4 years for public or private school. And type 7 is 100% of tuition and fees for public school only at their in-state tuition rate. And you can convert a type 7 to a type 2 for 3 years, so $18,000 a year for 3 years if you decide you don't want to go to a public school. Since a type 7 can only be applied to a public school and get that tuition completely funded, if you decide you don't want to go to a public school, you can still go to an out-of-state or private school. You just have to convert that to a type 2, but only for 3 years. So starting your sophomore year, you'll be getting $18,000 a year for 3 years. Lastly, with scholarships, they have an annual stipend of $900 for textbooks and up to $500 a month for living expenses. If you're a freshman, it's actually $300 a month. As a senior, it's $500 a month. But with that, as a freshman, you don't ever have a service commitment. So even if you're on scholarship and actively receiving money to go to school there, you don't have a service commitment until you're a sophomore in college or sophomore in ROTC. And you can leave with no obligation to the Air Force, no service commitment, and you don't have to pay that money back. So you can effectively get 1 free year of college if you do Air Force ROTC and get a scholarship. And you don't have to pay that money back, because we want potential officers, potential cadets to give this a try, to kind of see if Air Force ROTC is for them, if the Air Force is for them. We don't want to lock anyone into a contract that they're not sure, especially at 18 or 19. So this is kind of your way to try out the program. And if you don't like it, you can leave with basically no consequence, even if you're on scholarship as a freshman. So it's called the freshman option. With that, here are the requirements to apply. You have to be at least 17 years of age, a U.S. citizen. Academics-wise, 1240 SAT, 26 ACT, and a 3.0 GPA. If you have anything below these, you'll pretty much get flagged, and you won't get the opportunity to apply for the scholarship program. But even if you're above these, you should try to get your score kind of in the average or higher. So if you're slipping on one of those scores, so the averages are 1367 SAT, a 31 ACT, and a 3.7 GPA. If you're slipping on one of those test scores, definitely see if you can retake the test. I know people are having problem getting test dates, and right now, there's no solution in Air Force ROTC to waive this as of now. You still have to take the SAT, ACT in order to qualify for a high school scholarship. But if you're having an issue with that, definitely send me an email separately, and we can talk about that and work something out, because I've been getting a lot of emails, and I usually just send them to a survey, and then that goes directly to headquarters, and they're actively trying to figure out a solution for that. So with that, the last 2 parts of your application are a fitness assessment and interview. So your fitness assessment is a minute of push-ups, minute of sit-ups, and a 1.5-mile run. And you don't have to actually pass the physical fitness assessment in order to apply for the high school scholarship program. It does look better, so I tell applicants it won't hurt you passing it. It can't really help you that much, but it'll hurt you if you don't pass it in terms of like the interview. So you will get interviewed, and they might ask you like, oh, why didn't you pass this? If you don't pass it, and you'll have to answer for that. So the interview is a very important part of the application. It's a face-to-face interview, but probably now virtual interview due to COVID at the closest Air Force ROTC detachment. So it depends on your zip code. Usually in Maryland, it goes down to a UMD. If you're in Virginia, it can go to UMD or UVA. And then if you're in DC, it'll go to Howard. Here's the physical. Oh, yep. Sorry, did I have a question? Okay.
Yeah, I was just asking, what are those minimums specifically, if you can?
For the physical fitness
Push-ups, sit-ups.
Yeah, so I pulled them up right here. So for females, push-ups 18, sit-ups 38, run is 1622. So for example, you have to meet those standards in order to pass the physical fitness assessment. So if you fail even one of those standards, like let's say you get 17 push-ups, but then you get 54 sit-ups and a 1023 run, you'll still fail the whole test because you failed one section. So you have to pass every section with the physical fitness assessment. And this really matters the most when you're an Air Force ROTC cadet. So if you fail the assessment twice, then you'll definitely be put up for review and stuff like that. And it'll affect your scholarship and suspension and all that. But yeah, these minimums are very important to pass. So if you're slipping on one of them, definitely work on those over the others, trying to get a maximum score, because they don't make up for each other. The last part of the high school scholarship program is the highly desired major section. So these are majors that the Air Force desires more than others, and they're primarily STEM majors and foreign language majors. This isn't required to apply. It's just more competitive. So about 80% of scholarship recipients are under one of these highly desired majors, and then 20% aren't. So for example, in the Air Force STEM section, there's like electrical engineering, computer engineering, architecture, aeronautical engineering, and then in the foreign language section, there's a bunch of different languages. What I tell people, if you're interested in a STEM major that's not on there, there's a good chance you'll be able to still like transfer to that STEM major. You just have to apply through one of these majors and then switch into that one once you're in college, and you'll still be able to keep your technical scholarship. If you get a technical scholarship, you can't switch from like aeronautical engineering to like English and keep your technical scholarship, since English is not a STEM major. So if you have any specific major questions, definitely ask me about that. But I just pretty much bottom line say, find one of the majors on this list and apply through that if you have any interest in them, because you have a much better chance of getting a high school scholarship. So the last part of the scholarship briefing is the in-college scholarship program. So you can earn a scholarship in college as an Air Force ROTC cadet. You don't have to earn one in high school to go to college. So if you for some reason don't get a high school scholarship, or you just didn't know about Air Force ROTC, you can literally show up, become a part of the Air Force ROTC cadet as a non-scholarship cadet, and after the first semester of your freshman year, you'll be eligible for a scholarship, assuming you meet these standards. So after your first semester freshman year, if you have a 2.5 GPA, you have a passing physical fitness assessment, you're qualifying for all medical standards, and you have an 1100 SAT or a 22 ACT, then you can be put up for an in-college scholarship and get one, and get either type 1, type 2 for 3.5 years. Now, if you don't get one, you'll get pushed off to the next board. As a sophomore. As a sophomore, you'll take this test called the Air Force Officer Qualifying Test, and it's for your career. Essentially, it stacks and ranks you based on what career you're doing and everything like that. But every officer takes this, and as a sophomore, you'll take that, and they'll look at that for your scholarship application as well. But you'll keep getting pushed off until your junior year if you don't earn a scholarship. And then by your junior year, your eligibility for a scholarship will end, since you will have completed field training and you will have signed your contract. So you have basically until freshman year, second semester, all the way until your junior year to earn an in-college scholarship. But with that, for the high school scholarship, if you're a senior right now applying to colleges, you have to apply by January 14th, 2021. You go to afrotc.com/apply to actually apply. And then if you're a junior, I'd recommend going to afrotc.com/contact. That'll fill out the interest form. That'll get your name in the system. And if you're in the DMV area, it'll go directly to me. But again, you can also just email me. So my email is washingtondc@afrotcadmissions.com. That's my phone number, 206-678-4515. And both your counselors should have my information. But other than that, that's the end of this presentation. Thank you so much for your time. Sorry about the technical difficulty at the beginning. Definitely glad we got through that. It's only 10:03, so wasn't too late. But thank you so much.
We appreciate it greatly, sir. Does anybody have any questions for our representative?
Yes, I have a question. So I was awarded a Type 7 scholarship, and I was wondering, I was looking at some other colleges, and I know that other colleges have supplemental scholarships to kind of meet the difference in tuition between Type 7 converted to a Type 2 and what the tuition costs. I was wondering if University of Maryland has anything with that, or room and board scholarships or anything.
Yeah, so you're a Maryland resident?
Yes.
Okay, so you're wondering if there's like an extra scholarship that'll cover room and board. So Air Force ROTC itself doesn't cover that, but I can I can take your email down, and I can talk to the recruiting officer right there and ask him specifically about the Maryland specific scholarships and get back to you.
Okay, should I type my email in the chat?
Yeah, just type it in there, and then I'll send you an email, or I'll just probably send you an email and tag him and see if he knows, because he deals with very specific UMD scholarships, because I'm more of a national. That's a good question.
Lieutenant, can I just add a couple things to the underclassmen? You guys are thinking about this, just again highlight, he mentioned those majors, but the Air Force, because everybody in the Air Force needs to be technically competent, they're really looking for people that are ready to take at least calculus as a freshman in college. So when you're planning your classes for high school here, you want to get up at least through pre-calc as a senior. You don't want to, if you're not a big math person, you're thinking about majoring in Chinese or something, you still have to be ready for calculus. So don't make a mistake of not doing that. And the other thing, just for you underclassmen, he mentioned what Mr. Walters was talking about as well, the public-private thing. Public school means the state-owned schools like UMD. Private would be like Howard or GW or Georgetown. Those are private schools. So, and they're looking for the public schools because the tuition's cheaper for those scholarships. Is what the difference is. That's all.
Awesome. Thank you for adding that, for sure. Yeah, do you have another question, Walter?
Yes. I was also wondering about your experience, kind of as, well, you having this job and then being selected for like a rated pilot slot. That's also my interest career field. And I was wondering how exactly, I've heard from some of the majors and stuff, how they say that the pilot slots are more competitive, but I was wondering your experience with that, because I know you're going to be a pilot, and how that's different between ROTC and the Academy.
Yeah, absolutely. So the biggest difference that I know is that the Academy is offered about half of all pilot slots that are offered every year to different officer training sources. So there are a few offered to OTS, but like overwhelmingly half are offered to the Air Force Academy and half are offered to ROTC nationwide. That being said, I have a lot of friends that got pilot slots. It's just like a more competitive thing. and I can kind of go into exactly what the numbers that get a pilot slot pretty much. So there's this number called the pilot candidate selection method number. It's a PICSM, and I'm gonna put this in the chat. So 40% is your commander's ranking. So pretty much your commander's gonna rank you in your class, super important. 20% is your field training ranking. So that's pretty much that evaluation-based training. They rank you throughout that entire session. So that goes into your PICSM. 10% is your GPA. 10% is your physical fitness assessment, and the other 20% is the Air Force Officer Qualifying Test pilot section, the test of basic aviation skills, and then they kind of add that with your flight hours. So if you have some flight hours, it'll absolutely help you out in terms of the pilot section. So that right there in the chat, that's kind of how it breaks down. And then they basically take that number and they stack and rank you nationwide, and depending on where you stand, you'll get a pilot slot or you won't. And they also definitely look at like GPA and more heavily. I think if you like have a really low PICSM, but then like it's because like you don't have that many flight hours, but then you have like a 4.0, they'll think about that. But you know, they're pretty reasonable. But that's kind of how that works. In terms of me working this job and then going rated, so when I graduated, I had my code is still being a pilot. The thing is, I had a year before my pilot training started, so I applied to be in this job to start my active duty career early. This has been pretty awesome just because like I live in a pretty big city and I'm getting active duty pay. I'm getting time in active duty. So it's a pretty good gig so far. But if you have any specific questions about this job as well, I can also answer that too. So.
Do you know about how long as you said, you kind of had to wait for a pilot slot?
Yeah.
Do you know the average of like how long people normally wait for those pilot slots?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the actual slot, so pretty much in ROTC, you'll know when you're gonna be a pilot or not by like junior year, second semester. And then if you don't get a pilot slot at that time, then by senior year, you might get picked up in the supplemental board. And then after you graduate and everything like that, kind of when you're gonna start training, all my friends, it's become progressively more. So like my first friend, he started February after they graduated. And then my other friends started like January and March. And then I was going to start in April of 21. So then I was like, I don't want to wait from May of 2020 all the way to April of 21. So then I picked up this job. So I would just guess it's going to become more and more just because we have a pilot shortage. So we've been over recruiting for pilot candidates and stuff like that. But if the Air Force rolls out any kind of new flight like training plan and stuff like that, then it could become shorter. Cool. Good questions. Are there any more questions? Did you have any specific questions like how I got interested in it, or did I answer that, or sad?
Yeah, I was just wondering exactly how the process worked, kind of.
Yeah. You just apply for the rated board is what it's called in your junior year. So your junior year first semester, that's like the last semester before your rated board, and then you'll put in everything for your package, and you'll get everything by your second semester. And the only other thing that you have to think about is when you're a sophomore, right before you go to field training, you'll apply for an enrollment allocation. That's like a ticket to go to field training, and you can apply for a rated or unrated one. And unrated people, like the unrated enrollment allocation cadets, can still get pilot slots, but you definitely have more priority if you're a rated enrollment allocation cadet. So when you're applying and going to field training, they'll say, do you want to go rated EA or unrated EA? It'll be like your sophomore first semester, and then you say, I want to go rated EA. So that's kind of when the first thing starts for your pilot career. Yeah.
Connor, if I could just add a quick thing here, you're going to get counsel on this stuff your freshman year by the folks in the cadre there at the school you're going to. But obviously, the better whatever you're doing there, the better chance you have for getting your first choice or more options for what's next. And which means you need to get involved and really be involved in the unit there and get your face in front of people, and so that commander's ranking he's talking about goes up. But another thing is that interview. Well, you've already been offered the scholarships. You already had the interview, right? Well, for the rest of you guys who are listening to this thing, the interview is going to ask you, what are you going to do? How are you going to feel if you don't get your first choice? And so if you really have one big dream in the Air Force or whatever you're applying to, you have to realize you need a backup plan too, and how you're going to feel about that, because they're looking for career officers of any type, not just people who have the dream of being a pilot or whatever else your dream is. So you need to be thinking about that too for the answer in the interview. Kind of thing. Connor already had to do that, but you know, the better you do as a cadet, the more options you'll have for after graduation. That's the bottom line. So you really need to get involved and don't just be a classroom cadet. Get out there and do stuff. Get your face in front of people and be motivated and be a leader.
Yeah, that's a really important point, actually, sir. Like, I think a lot of people, like, I get applicants that are like, I only want to be a pilot in the Air Force. Like, what can I do? And I'm like, you might be disappointed. You know what I mean? Because when I came to the Air Force, I kind of just said, I want to be an Air Force officer. That was my big thing. I just wanted to join the Air Force after college, and that was my ultimate mission. So even if I was a maintenance officer, logistics officer, I originally wanted to do engineering. I was like, that's fine. I just want to be an Air Force officer. Then these options kind of got opened up to me based on my medical status, based on like my academic status and stuff like that. And I said, what, let me just apply for that. So, it's good to have goals, good to be like, I want to be a pilot and good to work towards that. But you're ultimately going to be an Air Force officer. That's your job. Even above being a pilot, you're an Air Force officer. So just always keep that in mind.
I also have some questions about study abroad opportunities. So I know you elaborated on the Project Go opportunities, but I was wondering, could you participate in college run activities for study abroad, or would that not be applicable with ROTC? Like if the college offers trips abroad or semesters abroad, is that able to be done while doing ROTC?
Yeah, that's a good question. So you should be able to. I think the best thing to do would be to do that when you're an underclassman, because in ROTC, you need a minimum of 3 years in ROTC. So let's say you take a full year doing a civilian study abroad program, you can still probably finish your requirements in the rest of the 3 years. So it's like 1 year study abroad plus 3 years staying stateside. So usually study abroad would be like one semester, so that should even be fine. The only thing that I would warn against is like if you're in the professional officer course, so you finish field training, that's kind of a dangerous thing. You should talk to your cadre about that, because I've always seen that people need 2 years in junior and senior year, like they're full 2 semesters being in Air Force ROTC in order to commission. So if you're going to do that, definitely get on that as an underclassman. The only downside to that also is that might not be funded by Department of Defense or the Air Force, especially like the tuition might be, if you have an agreement with your school, the tuition might be funded and everything, but everything else might not be funded. So that's the only real downside. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thanks. Yeah, I didn't know if a ROTC commitment was placed over higher priority of those options.
Yeah, for sure. Just plan it out with your cadre and just tell them your plan and stuff, and they'll work it out with you so that you don't get ineligible to graduate and stuff like that. Cool. Any more questions? Lots of good questions here. All right. Well, if you have no more questions, thank you so much for coming on here. Again, sorry about the technical debacle. I'll be on here until everyone's pretty much gone, or until I get kicked out, just to answer anyone's questions. And again, you can reach out to me, Washington, D.C. at afrotcadmissions.com. My job is literally to help you guys. I'm very close in age to most of you, so I kind of understand your priorities, and I also just graduated college. So thank you for your time. Have a good rest of your day, and stay safe.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.